doing stuff, or at least that was our jargon of doing it out of duty. Yeah, obligated. Yeah, that's right. It's my obligation. Yeah. We all know how we do obligations, don't we? You've shown up to events that you really wanted to show up to, couldn't wait to, and other events where it's like, well, okay, I'll go in there and make my appearance, give my gift, and get out of there. Who hasn't done that, right? We know what that's like when we have to show up out of obligation or out of duty. I don't think Jesus is saying it's your duty to love one another. And indeed, how would that even work? How could you love someone out of a sense of duty? So help me to understand, and I'm serious about this, help me to understand this command language. It's important. He says, it's a new command I give you to love one another, just as I have loved you, so love one another. Help me to understand this at this higher level. What's he saying? Walk me through it. Yes. I'll go ahead and then Randy. Yes, sir. Don't judge. That's a huge one. Yeah. It makes a difference, doesn't it? I mean, it's huge, and sometimes it's interesting when we're generous with people and listen. Sometimes we understand them so much better and how what they're doing or their struggles make so much more sense. Thank you, sir. Randy.
I think this shows us that love is not just an emotional attachment. It's not just, I like you, therefore I will love you. I think there is a decision process that we go through to decide whether we're going to love somebody or not early on as we get to know somebody. Sometimes we start to know somebody and they have some trait we don't like, therefore we're not going to love them. And I think we can see a trait that we don't like in someone and say, I'm going to love you anyway. And not out of duty, but because God loved me and I was worse than you. That's the point here. Jesus said, as I love you, you weren't perfect. You had problems. You had things I didn't like about you, but I loved you anyway.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point here is love is caring, and it's a do word. You know, we have to do unto others, right? Do it. It's an action, is what I'm trying to say. It's an action word where we love others as well. But there's a caring, and I think we decide that.
Yeah, I think so. And with that, kind of thinking about this thing, I always hate to mention this because you hear this in sermons, you read about it because it's something that's said, and it is one of those things, again, that invites us maybe to let our eyes glaze over because it's so abstract, but I invite you to really think about what it means. It's the notion of, I know y'all have seen it, the Imago Dei, right? That we're created in the image of God, the Imago Dei. And, I've heard, usually when I've heard people talk about the Imago Dei, it's somebody pompous, the Imago Dei. I always hate hearing it. It's the Imago Dei. And I'm like, and I always want to say, well, why don't you expand on that a little more, that we're made in the image of God? Because, people just sometimes like saying it, but I'm going to say just like the Imago Dei. And it's something to remember, that we're made in the image of God. It's what, I think it plays off what all of you are saying. If I'm made in the image of God, if you're made in the image of God, there's something valuable in you, something to be valued, something to be cherished, something to be treasured. I sat with a group of students Thursday night in class, and we had conversations about the assassination that had happened earlier that day. And, they weren't talking so much. We didn't know who the assassin was at that point. They weren't talking about that so much, but talking about their dismay with people on social media. And I really liked what they did because I thought they were perceptive. They were just so, because like they had friends across the spectrum, some that were rejoicing that the man died, saying burn in hell, etc., and others on the other spectrum saying, I hope the person that killed him burns in hell. And just both sides, just really horrible things that are said. And social media, gives people a platform to say things they would never say face to face. And they were just saying, I can't believe that I eat dinner, some of them said, with people, and they were talking because they have a wide variety of, I'm like this, I have people across that I socialize with across the spectrum, and that many of my students were the same way, said that would be rejoicing that this man died, whether they agreed with him or not, and others, and they were saying, I can't believe that other people, are, talking about the assassin as if they want him to go to hell rather than that he's someone that is redeemed. And then I went back and talked about years ago at a restoration forum in Milwaukee that I met the man that had baptized Jeffrey Dahmer into Christ. You all remember that years ago. And this was like a few months after Dahmer had been stabbed in prison. And this man, this preacher was saying, I had members of my congregation that wanted to terminate me, fire me. I had people that came up to me at church and said, why in the world would you share the gospel with that man so that he would go to heaven with us? If anybody deserves to be in hell, it's him. And he was like, I had no idea the level of teaching that I needed to do in the church, that people weren't rejoicing that this man had been saved. Now, did the things that Jeffrey Dahmer do, were they reprehensible? Absolutely. They were reprehensible. All sin is reprehensible, but we think about a society where on Thursday, people on both sides were cheering the possibility of somebody being in hell. If you have social media, you see that. He's going to go to hell. Oh, that assassin. He'll get his in hell. How in the world do we get to a place where we want people to go to hell? That's staggering to me. That's staggering to me. Because, I don't know about you. I don't want either one of those gentlemen to be in hell. And I can say that without, saying where I'm at in that. I can be multi-partial and say that I don't want this guy to go to hell. I don't want this guy to go to hell. For this guy that's still living, man, can somebody share the gospel with him? Can someone try to redeem him? And I think that ought to be where, our look is there, but with each other. It's like the stuff Randy was talking about. We get mad. I remember somebody years ago at a congregation, not this one, that, people didn't want to be around this guy because he had a nervous habit. He went, yep, 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 Neville, I'm going to see you tonight. Yep, 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 yep. And it's just like, it irritated people because he would, and I hope nobody here does that. I mean, I don't even know, but he would say, yep, 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 yep. I used to work in an employee assistance program. I remember working with somebody that, with a client that was going to be fired. They said he's a great worker, but he works in cubicles, and people, it must be an anxiety thing, but he's got to stop because people are wanting to quit. People just can't take it. And so what is it? They said, well, he makes a funny noise. And I knew what the funny noise was when he sat in my office. What brings you here today? Well, they say that my habits are difficult for my coworkers. What are they? Because I'm not really sure. Could you imagine sitting in a cubicle by somebody in another cubicle in your space going, all day. That'd be horrible. I know. But you know what? The yep guy and they're made in the image of God, the Imago Dei, right? I mean, it doesn't make it any less irritating, but they're made in the image of God. And I think when we begin looking at people like that, then this becomes easier. So let's kind of take a quick look at, what the idea of love is here. And it is that word agape that we see in the New Testament. And I tell you, I think that we sometimes make more of that. When I was doing my Greek studies years ago, Dr. Gary Burke had us look at the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament. As you all know, that during the Hellenistic era, a lot of the Jews couldn't read Hebrew, so they translated the Old Testament into Greek so that the Hellenistic Jews could read it. And so the idea is that agape is this kind of selfless love that God has for us, that kind of love, and that eros is romantic love, like between a husband and wife. Storge is type of love that we have for our family members, and phileo is friendship love. You've got Philadelphia, right? City of brotherly love, and not to offend any of you all from Philadelphia, but every time I'm there, I wonder how that place ever got the name Philadelphia. Any of you all go to Philadelphia? Wonder how in the world do they call that Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love? Remember, I've made in the image of God. If you're from Philadelphia and you're mad at me now, but anyway, but my point is that it's interesting that in the Septuagint, or Septuagint, some people call it the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament text. Again, that's not God breathed; it's just people translating. So let's read it. That there are places where they're talking about a husband-wife relationship that they use the word agape. So what Dr. Burke would argue, and I'm going to come different, was that, well, this is overstated. And maybe it is overstated, but as I've thought about it, maybe husbands and wives do better when they have that type of love and not just an eros love for each other. That maybe when that type of love is there, they do better as well. But this agape love is the type of love that we are to have. It's like choosing others good. It's sacrificial. Those are some things we're looking at. So I think as we look at this, we want to think about this in a number of contexts again. In our marriages, how does loving one another in this way fit? Well, obviously, with my marital partner, if I'm putting their needs first and they're putting my needs first, if I'm thinking about how can I really meet their needs, and think about and they're thinking about how they can really meet my needs, we're going to flourish better. It's not, you all remember the old, I sometimes used to watch Nick at Night. I haven't watched it. I don't think it's even on anymore, but I remember watching The Honeymooners and thinking when I was a kid, I thought that was funny, but I cringed as an adult looking at it because the Jackie Gleason character would say to his wife, I'm everything and you're nothing. Do you remember it like that? It was it was a really laugh line. I'm everything and you're nothing. And in the 50s, people would laugh about it. In the 60s, I was born in the 60s, and so I saw some of those then. But what an awful thing. What an awful way to posture ourselves. I'm everything and you're nothing. And people normally don't say things like that, but yet it's I think it's something that we look at. Just thinking about how things go better. I think love and marriage would mean that, we would work out ways to forgive each other when things happen, and we'd speak kindly to one another in conflict. One of the things I found in working with couples since the late 80s is that I'm amazed at the things that people forgive each other for, quite frankly. Also amazed at the reasons people divorce, but I find myself more amazed at the capacity that couples have that love one another to forgive each other. It just amazes me. It staggers me how people can forgive one another when they truly love one another. And I think, again, in a Christian marriage, thinking about this love one another in this way is really helpful. I think about how this plays out in parenting and our parenting and our kids. Sometimes we have kids that are more challenging than others, do we not? I mean, we had 3 children. One of them was very lightly on the spectrum, and the one very lightly on the spectrum was a little harder to parent. A good guy, but just lightly on the spectrum, and it created some challenges. But how do we give that guidance, correction, mold them, as we love them, because the love goes there as well, the love and friendships, etc. I don't want to bore you with this and overstate the obvious, because think about it, it's easy to say, yeah, love one another. Yeah, we all know that. Yeah, the Bible says that. Yeah, who doesn't know that? We learned this as kids in Sunday school. Yeah, everybody knows that. Intellectually, everybody knows that, right? Or almost everybody knows that intellectually. But playing that out in our relationships with our fellow church members, playing that out in our marriages, playing that out in our parenting or grandparenting, playing that out in our friendships, playing that out in our actions with people at work or people at the grocery store is very, very different. It's hard, It's easy to say, hard to pull off. Any thoughts? Because I'm rambling, and y'all don't want me to ramble. I don't have the voice to ramble. Yes, sir.
The fruits of the Spirit in the New Testament Christian is different than when they first started.
Yeah.
It's deeper. It covers a broader area. It covers everything. You love God first, everything else comes in. As far as His plan, we study the Word, we live by the Word, and we're judged by the Word. So we just have to keep making sure love each other and work with each other so we get better.
Yeah, I think so. I think the fruit of the Spirit are amazing, right? They want to think about it. Kind of a template for Christian living, for us to think about how we can grow in it. And you're right, the more we grow this fruit, the better. And it's interesting to think about the possibilities of the fruit of the Spirit. Appreciate that, Jerry. Anyone else? Closing comment, closing words. Okay, well, I hope there's been something of value in it. I'm going to give you 2 minutes back early, because I usually take it on the other side, and so you get 2 minutes back early, which nobody ever complains about that. I never have understood. I've taught in the academic setting for years, and we always say nobody complains about getting out of class early or class being canceled when they paid a lot of money for it. I think as a consumer, people would be outraged, but they're not. They're always happy, even though they paid a lot of money for it. Never can figure that out, but that's the case. All right, we'll see y'all. Have a good one. Bye-bye.